Hello, my chicklets. Thank you for stopping by. You never realize how hard it is to do an intro for a video until you're sitting with a blank microphone trying to figure out what you're going to say. I did want to encourage you all, if there are any stories you want me to read, or if there's anything you would like to commission me for, that's both recording a story that either you have written or is in the public domain, or writing you a story, that is in the link in the description. Also, today's story is one of my favorite stories that I've ever written. I think it's a really good story, however, it does have some mature themes, specifically the use of alcohol as a coping mechanism. If that's not your vibe, I do encourage you to listen to a different story and come back next week and we'll have something a little easier. That being said, let's jump into the problem. Logan didn't have a problem. A problem would constitute that it was affecting him in ways that were unexpected. Logan knew exactly what he was doing, exactly how it was affecting him, and exactly what the outcome would be. He was logic, and he was smart enough to make the choice that needed to be made to make him most efficient. His newfound coping mechanism might be less than healthy, but addictions were tied to emotional triggers, and he was logic. He didn't have emotions, he wasn't addicted, and the moment that this wasn't the most logical option for processing his stressors, he would stop. He would have no problem stopping. Looking down at the empty bottle of wine that sat on his desk, Logan sighed, pushing himself out of his chair. He was desperately trying to lie to himself. Even he wasn't convinced it hadn't become problematic. He was spiraling, and Logan was aware of it. It used to be that a single glass at the end of the day would help his frayed nerves, but now he was drinking at least a bottle a day, if not more. Whatever it took to keep himself from feeling the world around him. He wasn't supposed to feel. He just wanted to be numb. Numb was so much easier than the screaming echoes in his head. With a snap, Logan cleaned up his room, looking around what used to be a calming place for him. At one time, his room had been his pride and joy. Awards from childhood, Thomas's diploma, everything that Logan had worked hard to build. Now, it was a monument to his failures. A life they could have had that was abandoned, along with him. After cleaning up his room, Logan had to sit back down. That was a lot of energy for someone not completely sober. And a lingering thought in the back of his head told him that he had earned another glass of wine, but he could feel that maybe he needed a glass of water, just this once. Cleaning up his room felt like giving himself a new perspective. He summoned himself water, sipping at it lightly. It was nice to have everything looking so clean. It was relaxing. It made him feel better to have the area looking clean after so long. There was a small bit of hope in him that maybe he could keep his room clean, but he knew it wouldn't last. It wasn't just the bottles, it was his mental state, the things he was constantly trying to pretend that he wasn't feeling. However, maybe for just a little bit longer, he could pretend like everything was okay, like he wasn't being ignored, like his function hadn't been relegated to comic relief, like he had actually found his answers at the bottom of the bottle. Time wasn't kind. He couldn't sit there in his world of fantasy much longer. Despite all of the turmoil in the mindscape, Patton had been trying to maintain movie night, a tradition that had started when they had accepted Virgil. Things had felt simpler back then. Watching Big Hero 6 with everyone else after Virgil had convinced Roman that his choice sucked had been entertaining. Now everything was strained. Patton let Roman get away with everything he wanted. Virgil was on the prince's side, and Logan was left to fend for himself, if he wanted to fight at all. Honestly, he had a feeling all of this was going to fall apart. The sooner the better. He didn't want to have to deal with the three of them, but he continued out of obligation. It served no purpose for Thomas to continue to fight himself. In what little ways he could, Logan wanted to support Thomas's growth as a person, even if it meant he got left behind. "Hey, Logan," Patton said with a smile that looked a bit forced. He was trying his best, but they all knew it wasn't enough. As Logan looked at the fatherly side, He could only see the panicked look of frustration and fear as Patton hit the skip all button, as he shoved aside Logan's commentary. "Patton?" He responded with a nod, sitting down on the couch in the same spot he always took. He didn't want to add to the stress Patton had been experiencing. Logan was trying to be the best logic he could be. He wanted to support everyone's mental health. He'd been trying to change, but it didn't feel like enough. He could already feel his buzz wearing off, and he rubbed his temples, debating on if he was going to try and make it through movie night as he continued to grow more and more sober, or if he was going to continue on his bad habit. Roman was glaring at Patton, refusing to say a word to him. Virgil refused to make eye contact altogether, and Logan felt his headache grow. "You look awful, nerd." Roman had always been like this. He pushed and he teased and did whatever he wanted. He said cruel things not because he was cruel, but because he had so little of a filter. He was more like his brother than he realized sometimes. Normally, Logan just let it brush off his shoulders, much like he brushed off Remis's Morning Star, but today, he just couldn't handle it anymore. He conjured himself a glass of wine, sipping at it slowly. He didn't want to feel anymore. As Roman put on a movie, Logan could feel Patton staring at him. Logan was sure that Patton was judging him, silently trying to figure out how to bring up the conversation without being rude. Well, the joke was on him. That wasn't possible. Not if he wanted to get the information he thought it was so important he needed. Logan ignored him, just like everyone else had been doing to him. At least, he did until he had finished his glass, and Patton continued to stare. At this point, it was just annoying. "Is there something you need?" Logan snapped, eyebrow raised, irritation written into every harsh crease on his face. Patton hesitated. If he had any good sense about him, he would drop it. But of course, he didn't. Logan knew only a few of the sides had brain cells, and Patton wasn't one of them. Maybe he was being too harsh. No. After everything that had happened, Patton deserved worse, and it wasn't as if he was saying any of this out loud. "You've been drinking a lot of wine recently. Are you enjoying it?" He chickened out of the question he was going to ask. Of course he did. It was Patton. "This is a decent vintage. I have it simulated from one of Thomas's memories." "Oh, well, I'm glad you are enjoying it. You should be careful not to drink too much, though. It's not healthy for you." Logan looked at Patton, eyebrow raised. "Patton, we are metaphysical beings. Drinking doesn't even make us drunk unless we choose for it to do so," he stated, waving his hand as if that fact was obvious. "Well, it's just unlike you, kiddo." "First of all, I'm not your child. And second of all, I'm allowed to pick up new habits as they suit me." If Patton wanted to continue to dance around his point, Logan wasn't going to entertain him and give him the information he wanted. And apparently, Patton wasn't going to ask. "Yeah, you're right. I wanted to make sure you were aware of the change. You know, sometimes we start picking up habits and we don't even realize it." "Leave the nerd alone," Roman called. "If he wants to drink, let him drink." Logan was both thankful that Roman cut in and frustrated. He was aware he was drowning, and all the three of them could do was push him aside as they continued their next fight. Roman came to his defense, but he was completely ignoring the fact that Logan needed help. Silence once again fell over the room, the only sound being that of the TV in front of them. The wine in Logan's stomach churned, and the itch to grab something stronger ran up his spine. There was a part of him that was thankful Patton had dropped the subject, a part of him that was thankful Roman had stopped their conversation. He didn't want to talk about the unhealthy nature of his coping mechanisms and all of the other things he already knew. He just wanted to be left alone. However, there was another part of him desperately crying out, begging for someone to notice he was in trouble and needed help. He was desperate for the care which might make him break, and truthfully answer the question Patton refused to ask. "I am very much aware," he answered, gripping the side of the couch. How could he not be? He was aware he had a problem. He was aware he needed help. But the numbness was so much more preferable to the pain. Loud, intrusive thoughts plagued him during the day, and if he didn't self-medicate, they would almost assuredly win. What was a side to do when they realized that they were no longer a useful part to the human they cared for? He needed to cope more than he needed to stop himself. He wasn't willing to admit the truth that waited for him in sobriety. No one was going to offer him a helping hand, so he was going to do what he needed to do. Quiet was no longer the calm of a movie night, but the tenseness from an unfinished conversation. Patton was fidgeting, and Roman and Virgil eventually looked back at the two of them. There was something in both of their eyes that Logan couldn't pinpoint, but he wasn't comfortable under their gaze. "I will be returning to my room." He stood up, pushing himself from the couch. Maybe that wine had been a little stronger than he thought. It was fine. He continued to pretend. He had a lot of practice in it. Honestly, he was thankful to have an excuse to leave anyway. He hadn't come down to be judged, and he had no intention of staying here if all they wanted to do was stare at him and make him feel guilty for the way he was coping with the pain they caused. He swayed a little bit as he reached the top of the stairs, hand on the wall to keep himself up. It didn't feel like they were staring anymore. Maybe this was just one more time that they wanted to get rid of him. He summoned a bottle, drinking a hefty swig before disappearing it. He was fine. Everything was fine. The world was spinning, but he had nothing else to do tonight. He didn't have to work, and he could just slip into unconsciousness. As he entered his bedroom, he found the whole floor covered in empty bottles, glasses, any kind of container that had once held alcohol. What was more, he knew each one. The bottle he had just drank from a moment ago was sitting on his desk. They were all staring at him, mocking him, and he recoiled. Hand on the door handle. He had just cleaned his room. All of this should be cleaned. Instead, it was meticulously placed as if to mock him. Was he really so drunk that he was starting to hallucinate? He knew he had a problem. He just didn't think it had gotten this bad. "Hello, chemistry solution. Get it? 'Cause that's what you smell like?" Remis was laying on his bed looking at him. There was a smirk outlined on the chaotic man's face. He didn't normally have issues with Remis, but after the incident with Thomas's schedule, after one more person had helped him be pushed away, "Out!" he growled. Logan snapped to get rid of the bottles, but they didn't move. This had to be some fuckery that Remis was pulling to prove a point. Fine. Logan would just do it the old-fashioned way. He began picking them up one by one. "Now where's the fun in that?" Remis watched him like a hawk. This was the exact reason that Logan had left the movie night. He didn't need to be judged. He wanted to cope in peace where no one else would give their 2 cents into how he could fix a problem they caused. "You know, Danny says you're going to come to your senses and reach out for help, but I think he underestimates how stubborn you are. So I took over." Why should he reach out for help from a prince who never listened to him, an emo who called him the least favorite, a father who refused to listen to anyone's voice other than his own, a gremlin who wanted him to suffer, or a snake who benched him? Why would he reach out to any of them? "Get out," Logan stated again, frustration and anger pouring over him as he fought to grab one of the bottles that was sitting on the floor. Bending down like that was hard. He almost lost his balance, but he refused to lose his dignity in front of Remis. He refused. "Nah, I'm here to stop you and force you to look at the consequences of your own actions, or some shit." Remis was acting nonchalant, laying in the bed as if this were a normal conversation between friends, but he didn't get that privilege. Logan could feel his blood boiling, his anger pouring off of him in waves as he threw a bottle toward Remis's head. He shouldn't have done that, but the anger felt so good. The bottle shattered next to Remis, and Logan could feel his body getting hot. "You don't get to play the hero when you are part of the problem." Logan went to grab another bottle, ready to throw it again, but Remis wasn't on the bed anymore. Instead, he stood in front of Logan, holding on to the other man's wrist tightly. He was stopping Logan from expressing his anger, stopping him from lashing out, but this was the most he had felt in weeks. He wanted the anger because it was the only emotion that didn't leave him feeling like a gaping hole had been shot through his chest. He didn't want to see the pity in Remis's eyes. "I want you to go crazy." Remis's voice was surprisingly calm and quiet. "But this isn't what I meant. You need to throw that anger somewhere where it'll be constructive, or you're just gonna get consumed by your own flames." No, he didn't get to lecture Logan. He didn't get to try to be a savior. Logan fought and struggled against Remis's hand. He didn't want to hear this. He had been fighting alone for so long when he was hurt. No one reached out to him. He wasn't going to lay down his weapon just because someone was finally acknowledging that there was a problem. "Remis, let me take over." That was Janice. His voice was smooth and calm as Logan felt Remis disappear. Janice took his place, but he led Logan's hand down, no longer raised in a form of aggression. "I'm sorry, Logan," he whispered, and for a brief moment, Logan almost felt like he was going to get the apology he wanted, but instead, Janice continued, "This is going to hurt, but you need to let yourself feel all of it." Suddenly, the buzz and the anger were gone, instead replaced by everything both had been trying to mask. Tears began pouring down Logan's face as he almost collapsed to his knees, caught by Janice's other arms. "Please, I don't want to feel, I don't want." "I know," Janice cooed quietly, "but you need to. If you are going to get over this, you're going to have to feel all of the pain you've been hiding." Logan collapsed into Janice's chest, his legs having already given out. "Please, I don't want to feel anymore." Thank you all for listening. I know that's kind of a bittersweet ending, but that is where the story ends. Every time I reread this story, specifically at the end, it makes me think of the song "Diagnose Me" by 3 and that ends up being on loop in my head for days afterwards. So I have that to look forward to after recording this, and I will probably have it to look forward to again once I edit this. Hopefully you all won't end up with songs stuck in your head from this, but if you do, I hope it's an enjoyable experience. I hope you enjoyed the story as well, and I hope you have a wonderful day.